Welcome back. So, volcanoes can have a large impact on society. Let's talk about it. So, let's first talk about deaths. So, volcanic causes of deaths since 1 Anno Domini, year 1 of our Lord. That's what AD stands for. Anno Domini. It's Latin for the year of our Lord. For instance, we're in 2022 AD. AD doesn't stand for after death. Anywho, so volcanic causes of death since 1 AD. So there's been around 275,000 deaths since 1 AD, and all of those came from 534 eruptions. There's been tens to hundreds of thousands of eruptions on Earth in the past 2,000 plus years, but only 534 of them have resulted in recorded deaths. And in all of that time, in the past 2,000 years, that's 275,000 people died in those 2,000 years. Doesn't seem like a lot. Of those deaths, 29% of deaths are associated with pyroclastic flow. There it is. Number one hazard. It's a primary hazard. 23% of deaths are associated with famine or disease. That's a secondary hazard. 21% tsunamis, secondary hazard. Lahar, secondary hazard, 15%. Volcanic gases, 1%. That's primary, but floods, secondary. Lava flows. You can see lava flows is just less than 1%. It's down there with earthquakes and lightning. So lava flow is not really accounting for a lot of deaths. But you can see pyroclastic flows, the single most deadly hazard, and it's a primary hazard. But if you look, secondary hazards actually make up a big chunk. It's 59%, maybe almost 60% of deaths come from secondary hazards. But in general, the number one hazard, pyroclastic flow, at 29%. So where do they occur? Our old friend Indonesia. So of those 275,000 deaths, 132,921 due to volcanoes, deaths are in Indonesia. That's almost half of all recorded deaths in the world, 48%. South America, the West Indies, around the Caribbean Ocean. Japan is up there. Mexico and Central America. Hawaii down here. And that's a lot of that's just from one single event. North America, in the past 2,000 plus years, there's only been 94 deaths. A number of those being either in Alaska or from the Mount St. Helens eruption that happened in 1980. So yeah, so these are where this happened. But again, Indonesia, number one. What about particular single instances that had the largest amount of deaths? The top two, go figure, are in Indonesia. So in 1815, there was an event that caused 60,000 people to die. In 1883, at Krakatoa, you're going to hear that name again very quickly, 36,000 deaths from one single event. Hawaii in 1790, 5,000 plus people. Again, nowadays you don't really get that in Hawaii. But if you look, all right, of all the fatalities, all other instances, all 520 of the other volcanic eruptions that caused death, only accounted for 71,000 of those deaths. The other 200 plus thousand all came from these 13 specific eruptions. And a lot of these, again, happened in the past, with the exception of 1985. Some of you may have been around down in Colombia. So what about more recently? What about some notable earthquakes in the 21st century? That's the century we're in now, starting in the year 2001. So, just recent. Let's go from top to bottom. And these are ranked from VEI, Volcanic Explosivity Index. The higher the number, the bigger the explosion. So the Hunga Tonga in the country of Tonga, this year, 2022, this is kind of how we talked about this earlier in the semester. Only 5 casualties, but it was a submarine eruption. Explosion heard all the way up into Alaska. 2 people were killed by a tsunami, a couple other casualties here and there. It's likely the largest eruption so far, depending on when you're watching this, in the 21st century. So they think they don't have a VEI yet. They have to calculate everything, but they're thinking it's a 5 or above, maybe even a 6. In 2011, there's a 5 on the VEI in Chile. No deaths. A lot of flight disruptions in the southern hemisphere. Give this one a shot. Try to pronounce this one. Eyjafjallajökull. I practiced. It was a 4 on the VEI, so pretty explosive. Again, no deaths, but caused the worst flight disruptions over Europe since the Second World War. Over 100,000 flights canceled or delayed, costing $1.7 billion lost for the airline industries. Last year, in 2021, 4 on the VEI La Soufriere in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This is right near the tsunami lab that we did. Didn't we say that a volcano caused was the trigger for the tsunami? So this is the largest volcanic eruption in the Caribbean since 1902. Didn't necessarily cause a tsunami in this case, but I'm just saying that this is the same area. St. Vincent was one of those islands kind of just north, I think, of the submarine volcano that we said caused that tsunami. So volcanic activity in that area for sure. No deaths. Now, let's look at this 3 VEI down in Guatemala. 446 people were killed. Oh, guess what? From a pyroclastic flow. Deadliest volcano in the 21st century so far. Krakatoa. Wait, didn't I just say that was the second most deadly volcano back in 1880 something or other in Indonesia? Yep. Erupted again, 2018, 426 deaths, and actually triggered a tsunami, so a secondary hazard of the volcanic eruption. Italy, 2 on the scale, 1 death. It was a hiker climbing Mount Stromboli. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes that happens. And you can even get something very low on the VEI, so not very explosive, in the Democratic Republic of Congo in 2002. You get 245 deaths because 4,500 buildings were destroyed, leaving 120,000 people homeless. That's leaving people out in the elements without food. And that's where those casualties came from. Going back to Stromboli, 1 hiker dying on the volcano because it erupted. That happens. People climb volcanoes. That's me, climbing a volcano. An active one at that. That's Mount Rainier. It's one of my favorite places on earth. That's me climbing. That's halfway up the mountain. I think this is the first time I got to the ice and glacier snowpack. So anyway, I climb volcanoes. If that were to erupt, depending on how it erupted or what might have occurred, I could be gone. It happens. Here's a boundary map of the world of those notable 21st century eruptions. Let's see here. Indonesia, convergent boundary. Tonga, convergent boundary. Chile, convergent boundary. Guatemala, convergent boundary. St. Vincent, convergent boundary. Stromboli in Italy, convergent boundary. Eyjafjallajökull, divergent boundary. Same with what happened in the Democratic Republic of Congo. But still, convergent boundaries tend to be what we need to be worried about. I meant to not have all of that. But yeah, so why do I have this here? Oh yes, to show you that like Tonga and the other eruption, now I forget the name. The one happened down in Chile, as well as Eyjafjallajökull was a 4, so 5 and 4. So we're dipping into definitely the Plinian eruptions. These are pumping up large amounts of material up into the atmosphere, and this is what caused a lot of air traffic to be kind of shut down. So those are some notable 21st century volcanoes. We talked about the deadliest volcanoes. What about the eruptions that cost the most money? So definitely the one that cost by far the most money, of course it would be in Indonesia, is the Sidoarjo mud volcano. And the funny thing is, it was man-made, or it was humans doing something caused this volcano to erupt. It probably wouldn't have otherwise. And it started erupting in 2006, and it is currently still erupting. And it's a mud volcano. Oh, look, our friend Aya Fitlalyokuch comes in number 2. So number 1, $3 billion. Aya Fitlalyokuch, $1.7 billion dollars. Excuse me, billion done. Because again, that's the loss from airline industries. Japan. Mount St. Helens came in 4th in the United States, just under $1 billion, hundreds of square miles, just reduced to wasteland. The cleanup from that, 57 people, thousands of animals killed. Philippines, Montserrat, Papua New Guinea. Convergent boundaries. So touching on this one a little bit, during exploration for drilling for gas, an explosion created a mud volcano next to the borehole where they're drilling down. 88,000 cubic feet of just hot, bubbling, toxic mud is spewed out daily from this thing. The mud blocked the highway, buried farms and businesses, 10,000 people homeless, 50,000 people suffered some sort of health problems. We'll circle back to this one in a little bit. So these are the costliest volcanoes. And it's interesting that number 2, the Eyjafjallajökull, isn't necessarily from stuff destroyed, but just money lost from airlines not being able to fly. So much ash in the atmosphere, they couldn't fly to or from Europe. So if you were in Europe at the time, or you're trying to get to or back from Europe, you weren't going anywhere for a few months. Excuse me. So let's look at major losses from the Mount St. Helens, just to break down all the cost here. In Mount St. Helens, almost $1 billion, just short of $1 billion, $969 million. Went to well, there was some from the federal level, some private money from the state level, from the local, so county and cities, going into forestry, going into cleanup, property damage. So destruction from the forest, most likely because those forests were used for logging, and if you destroy all that forest, you destroy all those logs, so you're losing that money in timber. How much the cleanup cost. Property damage to houses, businesses, some agricultural losses, income losses. You add it all up, and you're getting just under $1 billion. The federal government lost most of that, but private citizens were kind of coming in right in second. The federal government lost most of it because they spent so much in the cleanup. And what about in 1955? A little bit different style eruptions. Kilauea, so more Hawaiian eruption, lower viscosity, more flowy eruption. So in 1955, there was an eruptions, and then adjusting that to at least 2021, 2022 to like nowadays. So there was 3,000 acres of land covered from this lava flow. It destroyed over 10,000 tons of sugarcane, so $12 million in today's funds. Also molasses, so different insurance, other fruits and vegetables, building equipment, livestock, roads that needed to be replaced. In total, $26 million in today's cost. So, yeah. So there are a huge cost, whether it's lives, whether it's property, whether it's federal, private, state, local, what have you. So deaths and cost are a big issue, obviously, with volcanic eruptions. But we're going to pause here. When we come back, are there benefits to volcanoes? That's what we'll explore.